so we're going to start work on page 3. While I bring up my screen, do you want to start reading the script page?
Absolutely. So, page 3 is about obsession and erosion. So, in panel 1, Sam has built his nest on the floor, facing the door, papers, books, scribbles, notes, looking photocopies. He's researching into the door. In panel 2, we have a close up of the frantic notes of things that he's seeing. Panel 3, we get a phone call where he needs to know what's behind the door. Panel 4, where off panel landlord conversation with Sam. And then, he's telling him, like, "I told you there's nothing there." And Sam's like, "But I can see it." Hangs up angrily. Panel 5, this is a bit of a time lapse of seeing Sam kind of go through day, night, trying to figure this out. Panel 6 goes up to the door, trying to listen to see if something is there. That was sort of where we started, and we're moving forward from that.
Yeah, so I'm looking as she was going over the script. I'm thinking about what, if anything, I would change on this. So we've mentioned before blocking or staging your panel, so you have an idea of like the important elements. So where the light is coming from, um, so you know that the direction or a focus of the panel is leading to the next panel, right? All of those things you want to think about. It's also taking cues from the actual script. So in the description of being surrounded by all the papers,
Hmm.
the disheveled feeling of it, right? So I want to make sure I can capture all of that. And I'm thinking now as I'm looking at it, and because there are 3 panels directly below, but nothing to the side, I may actually flip this so it actually feels like it's pointing the other direction. So let me think about that because we know that the light wouldn't necessarily be coming from that, would it though?
Well, what I like
So
about where we kind of ended page 2 with the bookshelf sort of coming down and spilling things out is it kind of nicely leads us to the beginning of page 3 where it's almost like maybe some of the things on that bookshelf are part of what's on the ground around him, right? So it's almost like some of the things that came off of it, it's like, wait a second, is there information in here? And that's part of possibly the pile that's formed, kind of has a reason to have started.
right, and thank you for reminding me about that because 'cause I'm just trying to, as I said, I'm trying to block this in a way where we are also having some kind of direction going
Hmm.
downwards, right? And I noticed right now that you've got, the shadow kind of going outwards, so I have
Right.
to think about that, but the actually having that bookcase there in some capacity gives me the ability to, so it changes the light, it changes the composition slightly, and so now I have to go, "Okay, since that is there, it does kinda lead your eye." It's almost like an arrow pointing towards panel
Hmm.
2, so I'm thinking about that early on, even though I haven't actually completely started working on the rest of the panel. I wanna make sure before I start getting too heavily into anything that what I've got going is working as is. The great thing, and I'm gonna keep on saying this, these are small, like, these are 2
Hmm.
by 3 inches, so I can't really work too detailed, and because of that, anything I do is gonna, I'm just really trying to get, like, very, very basic structures of this character, we're looking down upon them, and because we're looking down upon them, right, like, I I'm thinking, "Okay, so we've got that perspective where," and if I want to bring out my little nifty perspective tool here, right? Again, this kind of gives you an idea of like, okay, so where is the perspective here? Maybe it's somewhere around here. And that gives me the ability to just generally have an idea of like if there were any walls, that we would be seeing, they'd be coming out like that. We may not be seeing any wall. Um, Although I think if I were to look at this here, so the door, let's say if we were to just imagine there were walls. I think the door would be right here, that
Mhm.
infamous door that can't be opened. Um, then we've got a wall, then we've got another wall, then we would have a door here that leads to the bedroom, and that may be open. I don't think I'm gonna show any of those things per se, but just having an idea of where it is, because then now I'm going, "Okay, that bookcase probably maybe it's even overlapping a little bit, could overlap onto panel 2, right? What do you think?"
I like that, and I was actually gonna say putting that in, whether you keep it or not, it makes him feel very trapped, right? Like, all of a sudden,
Mhm.
the room feels like it's closing in, which is it's a neat contrast to, panel 1 on page 1, where it's this very
Mm.
open, inviting kind of space. We're seeing it from the first time from above. Now we're seeing it from above again, but it is not an inviting space anymore, right? Like, it's become very closed, very cluttered. It feels very claustrophobic, so I think it's doing a lot of work just by having that perspective.
Right, so because you mentioned the whole claustrophobic deal, I'm just creating these odd shapes, which I'm imagining are actual book clusters, right? It's
Mhm.
where all the books or paperwork that Sam has found just kind of scattered all around, but I'm trying to
Yes.
think about, like, making it feel like it is kind of surrounding them.
Yeah, and I like that because that is that kind of nest feel, like Sam is sort of in the center, and there's so much stuff that it's almost like if he wanted to get out of this nest, how would he even begin to do it, right? Like, he's almost been trapped into this space because he's become so obsessed with figuring out what this door is.
Right, so when we, go over dialogue, we can talk a little bit more about, like, how to decide what
Mhm.
to say and what not to say. But just right now, are we mentioning in this panel that, like, maybe, they've gone off to do some research? I can't remember what you just mentioned.
We don't actually have any dialogue in this panel. We don't have any dialogue until the phone call, but we could add something if we feel that it needs some explanation once we kind of look at it. If it feels like Sam's now speaking to themselves, being like, there's got to be something in here or something like that, like some kind of alluding to the fact that they're doing research in this mess.
Right, exactly. Yeah, just so it's not like a jarring thing. What is this
Hmm.
thing that they're looking at? Where did it come from? Right? Excuse me, because it's the first time we're seeing it,
Hmm.
so which is okay. It's just that means that you kinda have to do a little, explaining with dialogue to for the audience
Well,
doesn't have misconception.
exactly. So I think that now that we're sort of really figuring out the final framing of this and how much it's doing, I think that a simple little piece of dialogue of being like, there has to be answers in here somewhere immediately tells you that Sam is now using these piles to look things up, to research, to try and figure out what they've missed, what information is out there that they haven't gotten, which then motivates the phone call. Cause it's like, this got me nowhere. I'm gonna call the landlord again.
Right. Exactly. So now I've changed the shadow because there is like a shadow. If there's gonna be any kind of, let's say, directional light coming from this direction,
Mhm.
that you may have, that light source basically being blocked somewhat by the bookcase. Therefore, Sam is gonna have that shadow on them, and so one of the as I had mentioned before, you can create, like, almost like arrows pointing
Mhm.
towards the next frame that you want it to go towards so that the viewer understands where their eye is supposed to go. So even
Yes.
if I don't have it overlapping, I still have that dark shadow kind of pointing towards panel number 2,
Mhm.
and I'm gonna use that, uh I'm gonna lean into that a little bit. And because we'd actually decided to make these panels a little bit chaotic, um, I can, you know, make sure that, they all kinda work together even though they're not structured the
Mhm.
horizontal, vertical way, like, so you have everything kinda going a little bit back towards to left. So everybody reads zigzag left to right, down,
Yep.
up, down. So you have, even though you have, I'll just put a new layer here. So you have this arrow going this way, but because things kind of narrow here, it almost gives it the impression a little bit that you're supposed to follow it back down a little bit, right?
Yeah, and I love them not being in a straight line, right? That chaos, that the fact that it's not just within each panel, but it's starting to affect the actual composition of the panels, I think really does a lot without saying anything.
Exactly. Like y- the dialogue is important, and and again, these are all
Absolutely.
things we're going to keep on repeating. But the dialogue is important, but you want the visuals to kind of do a lot of the heavy lifting. So the
Mhm.
dialogue almost becomes like the supplemental. So it's adding things that aren't that are there, but like you wouldn't necessarily know the name of the person, right? If otherwise, unless they had some kind of like a tag on them, right? So you'd have to go, "Hey Sam, how are you doing?"
Yes.
and having somebody waving, right? So the art part of it, we all know the person's waving at Sam. We don't know what Sam's name is, and that's where the dialogue would supplement some of those things, right? So that's why I was saying
Correct.
in this one we may have like Sam going, I got the blueprints from the library. It's not in here, like that
Yes.
kind of thing.
Exactly, something that just sort of gives a bit of context to what you're seeing, because we don't wanna explain it all away, but we wanna make sure you're anchored enough at to sort of we made a bit of a leap from page 2 to page 3, so where are we now? What's happening? Okay, great, now I know what's going on, and then I can continue following on with the story.
Yeah. So I like the idea of this almost being these shapes. They don't necessarily have to be like they could have look like they've got writing on them. They could look like they're books, but I also like the idea that they're these shapes as well that
Mhm.
surround Sam, give Sam that claustrophobic feel, so they don't actually have to exactly look like a bunch of books together, but just to
Agreed.
give you this sense that it could be.
Exactly. It's a lot of stuff, right? And books is the main thing that we're visioning, but there could be other things that are in that pile, right? Like there could be some random keys or pieces of this or something that, like, Sam's collected in this journey to try and figure it out with the idea of it being research. But seeing like, some books so that you kind of are anchored in there. I don't think it has to feel like every single thing there is a book though.
I mean, what if one of them's the clock?
100%. I think that that clock just sort of randomly being there, it's like it's watching. It's watching to see what
Yeah,
happens.
yeah. We may or may not leave that there, but it may be a little bit too on the nose, but just
Only
as
if you
a
know the backstory.
yeah,
It's
that's
it's one
right.
of those Easter eggs that if you don't know it the first time, doesn't matter, you wouldn't notice it, but if you get the whole backstory, you go back and be like, "Oh, I see the clock." It's a real
That's right.
word.
Well, and I do like doing that. I like adding in little Easter eggs so that
Mhm,
those people that are that like so most people read comics within like a 20 something page comic book in like anywhere from 10 to 15 minutes. So
mhm,
if you're thinking about it in that way, maybe you're getting like 30 seconds of their attention per page,
mhm,
right? And then if you want to break that down even more, if there's like or five panels on there, so you're breaking down 6 seconds per panel, right? So you're really not getting a huge amount of attention, and all of that could have taken days to create in reality. So
mhm.
the more things you can put in there to get the reader to go back again so that they can take a little bit more time to peruse and go, I was reading it, I noticed the clock,
Mhm,
but I didn't really stop to look at it too long because I was really involved with the story. But now I'm going back to really look because that clock looks really familiar to me, and I'm trying to remember where I've seen it before, right? That kind of thing, and therefore you can get a little bit more visual real estate, I guess.
absolutely, and it's a bit of a reward to people that do wanna look at it again, right? That do want to go through it and notice those details and then start to put together almost the subplot, right? The other things that are happening kind of behind the story that you don't get on the first time and you're kind of not supposed to, right? Like they are kind of left there with the assumption of like this is worth another read, right? This is worth another glance. And kind of having those things sort of sprinkled throughout is a really great way to reward your reader.
Yeah, that's right. Like it's fun. It's fun, right? We're
Yeah.
investing time into this project, but we're investing time into our readers and fans, and we want them to
Mhm.
feel appreciated by what we're creating and making sure that, especially if there's like some fun references that a reader can go, oh, that's from The Shining, from,
Yeah.
this either book or movie or TV show or whatever that I remember, a video game or something that
Yeah.
I'm really into, right?
Well, I think what you said there actually was a really great point is that at the end of the day, we're in the business of fun. So, yes, we are making something that's meant to be off putting and horrific and whatever, but that's because that's fun for people to read. So, you want to actually keep that in mind when you're creating that, even though you're trying to do something that is deeply disturbing, the actual reader engagement in that is enjoyable, right? People are reading this because they like this kind of stuff, because they enjoy this kind of lore and these kind of dark things. So, no matter what, you are still creating fun without being funny.
Yeah, yeah, without trying to, I guess, try
Mhm.
too hard.
Exactly.
Yeah,
Exactly.
yeah. Well, and that's always the balance, making something entertaining for the reader, and trying not to cross that line where you take them out of whatever they're reading because you're being a little bit
'Cause there's
too.
too many references, and now it just feels like a thing of, inside jokes for people that get it, as opposed to a great story that's got a couple things in there to reward longtime readers or people that take a second look.
Yeah. Yeah, and that's why, like, when I try to do those Easter eggs, they're always kind of subtle, so
Mhm.
you have to look for them. If and then maybe there's an art to it. Like, there's like, if you were to make one of them really obvious, so that somebody goes, "Oh, okay, I see what you're doing there," and then they go, "Wait a second, did they do it in any other place?"
Yeah, you did
And
that a
now
bunch of
they
times
have
that I
to,
didn't notice. Yeah.
yeah. And the fun part is sometimes when viewers see things that I didn't even think about or the writer didn't even think about, and it
Mhm.
works, and you're just like, "Yeah, that's
You're
really cool
right.
that." Yeah,
Well, I
it's
think
always a really kind of. Go ahead.
I was gonna say, I think it kinda goes back to a mentality that a lot of people have, which is collecting, right? We like to search, we like to find rare things, we like to collect them and be like, "Ooh, what did you see in there?" And this is kind of that same idea where you're collecting nuances, you're collecting things that you're like, "Okay, I noticed." For example, in the story, the clock was hidden a few times within different scenes. I caught that, did you? So it is also playing on that psychological urge we all have is just to find something that other people didn't find or to find multiple things of something that you're interested in. So there's so many levels at which you can play with it, but as you said, it needs to be subtle enough that it never takes away from the core of the story, but it's just there in a way that if you were to look deeper, you'd be like, "Huh, that's fun."
So I have a question in regards to this composition.
Yes.
So in panel 3, we have it may not be so obvious, but it's essentially the cord is wrapped, like, around their forearm, like
Yep.
the phone cord, and then I was thinking it would be would it is is it necessary, or does it distract if I were to have that phone cord kind of go out like this to bring you back to this next series? Or, is it better just to leave it as is? What are your thoughts?
Hmm, that's a great question because I kind of like the idea of it almost noose-like, kind of starting to wrap around things, right? Like it becomes more than just the phone cord. There is something neat to that texture that it's almost like dragging you with it. Um, I like it because we are playing with stuff like that. Right? Like, if it was completely the only place that we, like, broke panel or that we did something different, it'd be a little out of character, but because we're doing that in so many places, I think it's kind of a neat touch.
Okay. So we'll leave it in for now. And I'm also changing up the, 'cause I had a close up of the person and they're facing outwards. And as I've said before, anytime your focus leads your eyes out, uh, that's you want to, because it's zigzag, you want to have them go back
Yeah.
down. And unless
Yes.
that was the last panel on the page, it almost makes it a little bit more difficult for the viewer to know. They generally know where they should look, but it's still one of those things where you don't
Yeah.
want to give them a reason. But with the chord here, it's also kind of, so we have these series of panels that are all very similar. So
Mhm.
there's nothing that's going to be blocking any main like focal point there. So
Yep.
I think it'll work still.
Yeah. I agree because that next series of panels is very much a, like, sameness to it on purpose.
Hmm. As somebody said, keys to a piano.
Exactly. Yeah, this has had a few different versions of what it could look like for sure.
Yeah, and now I'm adding a new element to it with the
Yes.
overlapping of the chord
Mhm.
going back to that panel there. So it just you know what? It's at this stage doesn't hurt to try it. We
100%.
could always change it down the line if we go, oh, it's too busy or it's distracting. I'm not sure why it's there. It's not needed. All that kind of stuff. So for now, I like the idea of
Well,
seeing
and
if it'll work.
that's the whole reason we're doing this stage, right? Is to try some different things out and see what works, which is why we've been talking so much about these rough stages because if you're trying to do everything precise to final, you're not going to try stuff like this, right? You're just be like, nope, let's just keep it nice and clean. Whereas because we are doing it in a stage where you can still make changes, let's try something out. What's the worst that can happen is we decide not to go with it.